Hello, everybody. To another video, and today we got to talk about community again. It's such an important part, or can be an important part of a crypto project, which is like controversial for me to say that like not every crypto project needs a community, and that's because, as you may or may not know, my view on what community actually means is different, nuanced than what most people think about it. Anyways, I've got my iced coffee in a fancy glass. Let's dive right in. So, as you may know, I've done a video on community in the past, so this one's going to be like a little bit redundant, just we got to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then we're also going to cover some new stuff about actually building a community. So, first things first, people throw around the term community a lot. They're using the term community when they're trying to say like users of a product, like Binance users. That's not a community to me. Then people are using the term to point at followers of a social media account. That's also not a community. Certainly, you're going to have overlap with your community and your users and your followers, but they're not the same thing, right? Users are people who are using your product. Followers are people who are following you on social media. And a community is a group of people, not a group of strangers who are just happen to be in the same Discord or like happen to be in the same place together. No, it's a group of people who are gathered somewhere that want the same thing in life, right? That's the key thing from my perspective that makes it a community, because what happens is now you have a group of people, they want the same thing in life. And because of that, it's quite easy for them to create a bond with other people, to make friends with other people. Friendships and relationships that can easily transcend the actual thing that brought them together. And so, why is a community valuable? So, a community is valuable because you have this group of people who have sort of a reason to come back to this meeting place because of the value that they're getting out of it. And because they are gathered in this one place and they keep coming back to it, you effectively have their attention, especially if you own that hangout. So, if you have biker gangs that hang out at a biker bar, and you own the bar, and you wanted to get some sort of a message across to the bikers, like Harley Davidson has launched a new bike, maybe some of you guys are interested in upgrading, like that's the business value in owning it, or having a community. You have people's attention, and if the community is really built well, it's going to stand the test of time, and that means that you're going to be able to have people's attention over a sustained period of time. And if you wanted to get some sort of a message across from them, or in front of them, you could do that. And then it's also just the branding side of things, of like being associated with. So you may see that I'm sort of separating the community into a separate thing from the project or the business or whatever it is that we're talking about. They're sort of like separate things. And what's usually going to happen when we're talking in the context of crypto is you have a crypto project, and in an ideal world, they build a community that's built around the core desire, whether it's freedom, whether it's making money, whether it's security, or uh, whatever, right? We're going to get to those archetypes shortly. Usually the project builds the community, and so there is a very sort of like very clear and obvious association. And that's kind of like what a community is and why they work, right? Because of that commonality. And I've been part of a community like that. I only say one because it's really only been one, because it's actually, I don't necessarily think it's tremendously difficult to build, but it requires effort and clarity and like a little bit of knowledge of some of the things that we're talking about today. So this community that I was part of, it was built around, this was like 2012. It was this online course where, the founder of it, or yeah, the guy who started it, he was helping people build an online business. Once again, this was 2012, so this is like weird back then, right? If you wanted to like quit your job and start, building an online business in 2012 to make money and sort of travel around the world, that to me was like heaven. But to most people, that sounded like you're batshit crazy. Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's just retarded, basically. But I went on that journey and was able to pull that off. But the point of that story is he did such a good job with like the dream that he was selling and the communication, that he brought together this group of people who, we were just online at first, and then there would be sort of offline meetups. And I specifically remember meeting one guy from Hong Kong. I was living in Sweden at the time. This guy from Hong Kong was traveling. He came by Stockholm, and we just like decided to meet, and we went out for dinner, and we just had so much in common. We're like instant friends, you know? And that, once again, coming back to, the community was built around a core desire of wanting freedom. And because of that, the people that he attracted had so much in common that when we met in real life, it was just instant friendship. And I've spoken on this before. Now it's 13 years later, and out of the people that I speak to the most, whether it's on the phone, WhatsApp, what have you, that I speak to the most outside of like immediate family, every single person, every single person comes from that community, which is no longer maintained, by the way. So that like official community is no longer maintained. But because we made true friendships, because of his ability to put like-minded people together in a room together, we are still very, very close friends. And I'm very good friends with the guy who started it as well. So that's the power of a community, right? So how do you do it? Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to get clear. So this is something that I've mentioned in the last video, and I've spoken on it several times before. It's just a framework that helps me put this stuff together. So the root of it is from Carl Jung. He wrote about archetypes. And then based off of his work, there's two other authors that wrote, and I'm going to actually get the name because I've got the book right in front of me. The book is called The Hero and the Outlaw by Margaret Mark and Carol S. Pearson. And they essentially outlined, 4 different categories of things that people want to do in life. And so those motivations are stability and control, belonging and enjoyment, risk and mastery, or independence and fulfillment. And within those 4, we've got 3 specific archetypes for each one. Okay? So the stability and control, we've got the creator, the caregiver, and the ruler. Belonging and enjoyment, we got the jester, the regular guy, and the lover. Risk and mastery, we've got the hero, the outlaw, the magician. And then the independence and fulfillment, we got the innocent, explorer, and the sage. And so what I've done is I've put these into a table, and I've tried to kind of summarize the core desire, because that's really the number one thing you want to look at here. So what we're trying to do here, and I've got to like I've got to paint another picture for you as well to kind of see how all this stuff fits together. So what you want to think about is the utility of your project. And the way I think about this is like the problem you solve. Then you want to think about your brand. And then you want to think about your community. And I'll kind of show you how these things fit together. So let's start with community first. As we talked about, community boils down to, what is their core desire? What is it that they want in life? And the reason we ask this question is because we got to know what we're building our community around, right? So if we go back to the archetypes, we could think about, let's say, the explorer. So this is really freedom based, right? So what does this person want? Freedom. Okay? So that's what community is about. What do they want? How are they going to get it? That's the utility, right? That's the the problem you solve is one aspect of the equation, and then the solution, or like how do you solve it, is the other part of the equation. So another way to think about this is, what you do is the tool that they use to get the thing they want. So if you have a community that's built around freedom, and you have a DeFi protocol that gives people somehow 30% yield on their stable coins sustainably, probably not doable, but let's just, for argument's sake, that's what we offer. Let's say 30% yield. So now we've got the thing that they want, freedom. We could even clarify this even more. So for this example, we can say financial freedom, yeah? Because there's different types of freedom. So let's say they want financial freedom. Let's say that we offer 30% yield. So that's the utility, or that's the tool that we provide them to get what they want. And then what is brand? That's what are they going to feel when they get it. So let's do this. What? Jesus. What do they want? That's community. What, how do I phrase this? What can they use to get it? And then we've got, how will they feel? How will they feel when they get it? I like to think about these in this way. And so if we actually look at some examples, so here's another table where we've outlined, based on the different archetypes, there are just a list of potential feelings that may suit your community, right? So if we're talking about the explorer, so this one is kind of based on freedom to discover, but you could also probably take it in a freedom, financial freedom type of direction. So let's see some of the example associated feelings. So adventure, curiosity, independence, authenticity, boldness, excitement, escape, wonder. So let's say, why would somebody want to get rich? Well, it could be security. It could be a sense of adventure. So let's just, for argument's sake, take that they want to, not work and just kind of hop around the world and live life, right? So they want to feel a sense of adventure. So now, if you were to do this, you would have clarity that what our community is actually built around is financial freedom, which means that everything that we do in the community, the discussions that we try to start, the kind of people that we try to attract, the topics that we try to integrate into the community, they all come back to this one thing, right? The content that we make, whether educational or like it, all roads lead to financial freedom. Of course, if you do that, you've now created this magnet about financial freedom, and you're going to attract people based on that. So that is how you theoretically start a community. And this is the beauty of this too, is that it doesn't really cost anything, right? And you can start to do this as a project at the very, very beginning. And I definitely think that you should. And I think that for most projects, I think that you should. And I think that you also can take your time with this, and you want to just make sure that you're attracting the right people. And so, how do you actually do this? So let's talk about that. First, you want to pick, you need a biker bar. Let's put it that way. We talked about the bikers briefly, right? So it's very important for every community to have a hangout. They've got to have a place to hang out, to have their discussions, to make their friendships, right? So what everybody in crypto does is default to Discord and Telegram, which is totally okay. But you got to realize too that you're building your business or you're building your community on rented land, right? Which is okay, especially as a starting point. And I think another point to talk about here is that when you go above and beyond, you guys might have heard me talk about the difference, or sort of how I've had to change from being a quantity guy to a quality guy, just because I've seen much better results from focusing on quality instead of quantity. I think if you're going to build a community, you might as well do it right. And if you're going to do that, your biker bar, I would think about the requirements for it. Like, what do you need to happen in there? You probably want, the ability to have short form discussions and long form discussions, and you want to have some maybe like ranking system or things of that nature. And I would long term be looking to build my own platform. I would like to own the biker bar. so that I could customize it exactly the way that I want. And if I want to get a message in front of people, I can do it the way that I want to. I'm not like limited to what I can do in Discord or in Telegram and so on and so forth. So you need a biker bar. That's the first thing. Um, the other thing is that meeting offline takes things to another level. You cannot reach the same level online. At least in my experience, you can't. So obviously, we're talking long term here. Usually, in most cases, when people talk about starting a community for their crypto project, like I said, they're just gonna whip up a Discord or a Telegram and start hoping that people are attracted to their project. But hopefully, at this point, what we've outlined is that you've started with your utility, the tool that you provide. From there, you're able to reverse engineer what's an archetype that makes sense in terms of building our community around the core desire associated with that archetype. We've got a biker bar, so we've got a hangout spot, and this is where discussions are gonna. This is where we're going to be adding value to this person or the other people in the community because they want or they're interested in this topic, right? That's kind of like the starting point. But taking things offline is where things go to another level because that's where people create friendship on another to another degree that once again can start to transcend the thing that brought them together in a way that's still actually good for the thing that brought them together. Because what happens is not necessarily that people make friends outside of the community and then they like go do their own thing and they want nothing to do with you. If you're still doing a good job with the community, just because people are now, let's say, communicating one on one outside of the biker bar, that's not a bad thing at all, from my experience. So that's only going to benefit you. And what really happens now is people start to form connections that are on a very different level because they're meeting each other in real life. And it's just a very different experience, because once you're in a sort of confined space and you're spending an extended period of time with people, you just reach different levels of, bonding or whatever you want to say. And there's like a sales thing that's related here that there's a saying that I heard, which is that people aren't going to give you their money before they give you their time, right? So if you're talking about a sales environment and the higher the ticket amount, usually the longer time people are, you know generally speaking, the longer time you're going to need to spend with people. And so on that same note, it's like the depth of relationships is directly correlated to how much time is spent sort of like directly with them, right? And the same with a sales argument, right? If you're selling one to one, face to face, that's going to be much more effective than like selling one to many online. Sure, you can do like numbers, but in terms of the depth that you're going to reach with one person one on one is very different. Same as like I have a private teacher now to learn Polish, and like I've done the group class before, and it's like very different, right? You're not getting the customized thing, you're not getting as much attention from the teacher. And so now it's like it's all eyes on me, and she's like finding texts based on she knows what I'm interested in. So she'll find stuff to read that's about a topic that I care about, and so on and so forth. So meeting offline takes things to another level. So I absolutely recommend trying to figure that out. And you can start small. Just do a small little gathering and you'll see what happens. It's a different thing. It's a different thing. So you need a biker bar. Meeting offline takes things to another level. And the final thing that I think is really important is that, especially in the beginning, and probably always, not just in the beginning, everything starts with you. You know, I think a good exercise to do here is to imagine what your perfect community would look like. And that involves, what does your biker bar look like? What kinds of people are you attracting? What discussions would you like to see in there? Like what topics do you wish people were talking about in there? What kinds of content do you wish people were publishing? What sorts of questions do you wish people were asking? And then you start doing all those things every day. So, like in the beginning, especially, everybody is just sitting back. They're waiting. Like 99% of people are just spectators, right? There's very few that are very engaged and like to take the first step and so on and so forth. So the way that you can accelerate things is by being hyperactive yourself, and you got to bring the content, you got to bring the discussions, you got to bring the questions, right? And you've got to welcome people. Like everything starts with you. And eventually you get to a place where people start to like engage more. But even still, it's probably never gonna like if you just let it run on its own, it's gonna go crazy like, like a lawn, right? An untreated lawn is not gonna be very pretty after, a summer season. And so you've got to be in there. You've got to be initiating freaking everything, literally everything. And I think it can get a little bit easier over time as people start to find the love for the community and they actually start to engage more. But coming back to my second point there, which was about like pruning, like you really got to think about your community as a bush or a lawn, right? And as you know, in nature, if left untreated, those things are going to just like, they're going to go their own way, right? And so you have to be very, very, very clear. Look, this can happen over time. You don't have to know every single thing that you think is okay, that you think is not okay from day one. But if you let stuff slide, it's kind of like raising kids, It's like if you just let stuff slide, well, then other people are going to see, like if some dude's an asshole to somebody else and you're like, yeah, I don't like that energy in here. So well, let's make a rule about like, okay, you have to be relatively kind. Like you can push back, you can challenge each other, but this guy called him a retard and like I just don't think that's maybe the vibe we want here. As an example, right? Then you've got to speak up. And if you don't, then other people see like, oh, that's okay, so I'm gonna do that. Or that's not okay. So I'm not gonna do that. So you're essentially setting expectations. And once again, this all comes from the top. This all comes from you. So I think that's enough to speak about community. It can be very, very important. All you got to do is reverse engineer from what is the tool that you're offering, right? What is it you want to build that community around? What is that core desire? You've got the list. I've given it to you. And from there, you can start to think about your biker bar, thinking about your perfect community. What does it look like in terms of what do you want people to talk about in there? What do you want the content to be about? It's all going to initiate from you, and then pruning, pruning, pruning to make sure that you're just keeping it on focus. And then eventually you kind of hit this point where people start to like come in every day and they're like, looking forward to it, start to tell their friends about it, and so on and so forth. So those are some thoughts, maybe like a bit of a cleaner video, I think, from the community aspect compared to the last one that I made. So that's it for today. Hope you're doing well. Let's talk soon. If you need any help with marketing your crypto project, you can hit me up on Telegram and we can chat there. All right. Talk to you soon. Ciao.